Welcome to the Bodhi Academy. My name is Shrutika and today we are going to learn about Reproduction in Plants, Chapter 12 from class 7th. So we all know that reproduction is a very important process wherein new individuals are produced from their parents. So in our today's class, let us learn how plants reproduce to produce their new young individuals. So, reproduction in plants takes place in two modes. The modes of reproduction in plants are sexual reproduction and asexual reproduction. So, in sexual reproduction, plants give rise to new plants without seeds. So, sexual reproduction does not involve formation of seeds, whereas in sexual reproduction, new plants are obtained from seeds. So today we are going to learn about reproduction in plants, chapter 12 from class 7th. So we all know that reproduction is a very important process wherein new individuals are produced from their parents. So this is about how reproduction takes place in human beings and other organisms. So in our class today we shall learn about how reproduction takes place in plants. So reproduction in plants takes place to two modes. The modes of reproduction in plants are asexual reproduction, which is the first mode. In this type of reproduction, plants give rise to new plants without seeds. And in sexual reproduction, new plants are obtained from seeds. So these are the two modes of reproduction in plants. First is asexual reproduction and second is the sexual reproduction. So in our today's class, let us learn in detail the first mode, that is asexual reproduction. So asexual reproduction is basically a type of reproduction wherein the plant will reproduce without seeds. So how this type of reproduction will take place in plants? So asexual reproduction takes place by vegetative propagation, budding, and fragmentation and spore formation. So all these methods of asexual reproduction we will study in detail in our today's class. So the first mode of reproduction is vegetative propagation. So vegetative propagation is basically obtaining a new plant from the plant parts such as roots, stem, leaves, and buds. So the first mode of vegetative reproduction is by cutting. So cutting, basically the example is rose. So here we can see that how cutting is done. So the first mode of asexual reproduction, that is vegetative propagation. So how vegetative propagation takes place in plant is by cutting, budding, and by cutting. So the first method of asexual reproduction is vegetative propagation, and this vegetative propagation takes place by cutting and budding. So first let us look at the example of how cutting is done for vegetative reproduction. So the example over here is a rose plant. The plant has to be cut at the node region. So node region is basically the part wherein it consists of the meristematic cells, which helps in formation of new cells, which will help this cutting part to develop into a new plant. So a plant is taken and the node region is cut and then it is planted in soil, which will give us a new plant. So this is how vegetative propagation through cutting is done. Second is bud formation, or by using the buds. So bud consists of short stem around which immature overlapping leaves are folded, and this vegetative bud can give rise to a new plant. So example of bud formation is potato. So we can see that potato develop the small buds, here, which so potato is an example of how buds can give rise to new plant. So here a potato develops small buds which will further develop roots, here roots, and the shoot which will individually develop into a new plant. So this is how bud formation give rise to a new plant. Similarly, bud formation can give rise to new plants in ginger and turmeric also. So formation of bud happens in potato, ginger and turmeric. So these are the three examples wherein how bud formation will help in formation of new plant in potato, turmeric and ginger. Another example is bryophyllum. So bryophyllum is a type of plant wherein they develop new plants in the margin of the leaves. So this is the margin of the leaf. So here the bud will form, and this part, if it falls into a moist soil, this part will develop into a new plant. So this is how in plant such as bryophyllum, bud formation will help in developing a new plant. So first we have seen how vegetative propagation helps in asexual reproduction. So vegetative propagation can be done through cutting and through buds. So cutting can be done in any plant wherein we have to cut the node part and then plant it into the soil. And buds are obtained from potato, ginger and turmeric, also in bryophyllum. So this was about first mode of asexual reproduction, that is vegetative propagation. Now let us move to budding. So budding, here we have example of budding, that is in yeast. So this is a yeast cell. Yeast cell will develop a small bulb-like projection coming out here. See, this is the developing bud. So the yeast cell in its asexual reproduction forms bud, and this process of forming the bud is called as budding. So bud is basically, it is like a bulb-like projection coming out from the yeast cell, and this is called as a bud. Then the bud matures and the cytoplasmic content from the parent plant, this is the parent plant, this we can say is the parent plant, and here is the new bud which is formed. So this content from the parent is transferred to the new bud. So after separation of the cytoplasm, it develops into a new individual. So this is the new yeast cell. This new yeast cell has now it has the capability to form more yeast cell, and this is how they will form chains of bud which will further divide to form more yeast cells. So this is called as budding. So this is the process of budding in yeast cell. So this was another type of method of asexual reproduction, that is budding. Now let us move to fragmentation. So now let us see what is the meaning of fragmentation. This is fragmentation. So fragmentation basically it takes place in algae and other organisms. Here for explaining fragmentation we have example of algae called as Spirogyra. So Spirogyra is a type of algae which reproduces asexually through fragmentation. So a individual algae, this is a strand of an individual algae strand. What happens here is this strand breaks into two fragments, and then both the fragment individually again undergoes fragmentation to form new individuals. So this is how algae reproduce asexually through fragmentation. The next type of asexual reproduction is through spore formation. So basically spore formation takes place in fungus and in ferns. So here we can see that spore formation is taking place in the sporangia. So this is a figure of a bread mold, that is a fungus. Here is the hyphae, this is the substrate. Example, this is the substrate, this is the bread, this is the substrate on which the bread mold, this is the fungus which grows on the bread. So these are the hyphae. Hyphae are like the roots of the fungus which will absorb all the nutrients from the bread. Then this hyphae will supply the nutrients to the spores which are developing inside the sporangium. Sporangium is basically a sac-like organ which helps in nourishing the developing spores. So these spores are basically asexual reproductive bodies of the fungus or of the plants. So they are very lightweight and the spore is covered by a hard protective coating. With a hard protective coat to withstand unfavorable conditions such as high temperature and low humidity, so that they survive. So for their survival they have a hard coating which surrounds the, this is like a spore has a coating around it. Spore are basically spherical bodies, they are asexual reproductive bodies of the fungus, and they contain and they consist of a hard covering which can withstand unfavorable conditions such as high temperature and low humidity, so that their survival rate increases. And what happens to the spores is wherever they get the favorable conditions and the favorable substratum, what they will do is they will settle on that substratum and then they will germinate to form a new individual. Same method is also applicable in plants such as moss and ferns. So they also reproduce asexually by spore formation. So this is an image of a fern. So fern is a pteridophyte. So behind the leaves there are many spores attached to the surface of the leaf at the below surface of the leaf. These spores then further will fall onto the ground, and then whenever they find moisture under favorable condition, they will germinate and form a new fern plant or a new moss plant. So this is how spore formation helps in asexual reproduction. So, in our today's class, we have studied that reproduction in plants takes place in two different modes, asexual mode and sexual mode. We have studied in detail about asexual reproduction, which takes place through different methods. First is vegetative propagation, which takes place by cutting and by bird formation. Then comes the other second process, that is budding. We have seen example of yeast. Then we have seen fragmentation, how fragmentation process takes place in algae, and spore formation, and how spore formation helps in asexual reproduction in fungus and in ferns and mosses. So this was about asexual reproduction and how asexual reproduction takes place in plant. So thank you for watching our today's video. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe.